So both I'm finishing the project of Kiddush, Mirz Hashem. I have another 20 pages to go over with my Chavrusa, but I think Mirz Hashem is very exciting for me. It won't be a large, fat sefer. It'll be about 250 pages, humble contribution. And now I want to go on to my next project, which is the Rambam Hilchos Talmud Torah. So if you're with me on that project, on that journey, just to get our feet wet and begin making that transition from Kiddush that we spent a lot of time on to Talmud Torah, I want to choose, at least for today, and then we'll see beyond that, the pasuk Mipnei seva takum v'hadarta pnei zaken. And notice there are two parts of this pasuk. The Reisha speaks about seva. Mipnei seva takum. The Seifa speaks about zaken. Now you might ask me, well, what's the difference between a zaken and a Seifa? It's just that one is 70, one is 80, one is 90. But the truth is that the word zaken, as we'll soon see, has a totally different meaning. It might not even reflect at all on a person's age. For example, the pasuk describes Yosef as ben zekunim, and Chazal say he was 17 years old, but he was a zaken in the sense that he was kana chachma. So zaken means a chacham. Now notice another discrepancy between the Reisha and the Seifa. In the Reisha, the emphasis is on kima, on standing, mipnei seva takum. In the Seifa, the Torah shifts to vahadarta. And vahadarta means hidur, to be mahader. To be mahader, I think, means to beautify. Like, for example, we have hidur mitzvah. We might also ask the question, what's pnei zaken? Well, what's the emphasis here on pnei zaken? Now, I think one of the main questions here is the relationship between the Reisha, the pasuk, and the Seifa. Do we integrate them into one whole, and elements in the Reisha reflect on the Seifa and teach us about the Seifa, and vice versa, or are there two separate mitzvahs here? One is mipnei seva takum, and the other is v'adarta pnei zaken. Personally, based on what I remember from my youth, from my studying Torah Girsa Diankasa, is that there is a relationship between the two, because the Gemara has a phrase, kima sheyesh ba hidur. In other words, the word v'adarta reflects on the word takum. It's not just any kima. For example, the Gemara wants to know if you would stand up for someone in a beis hamerchatz, in a bathhouse. And the Gemara says no, because that's not a kima sheyesh ba hidur. A beis hamerchatz is not a place for a hidur. So again, that's something that I just, crosses my mind from way back when. But I'm just pointing out that if you're talking about defining kima as kima sheyesh ba hidur to the exclusion of beis hamerchatz, then you see that there's an interface between the Reisha and the Seifa, meaning when it says kima in the Reisha, and it says they say v'takum, well, what constitutes, what qualifies kima? We're going to find out from the Seifa of the pasuk, v'adarta pnei zaken, that the word hidur reflects on kima to tell me that not every kima qualifies as a mitzvah of kima. It's got to be a kima sheyesh ba hidur. So that seems to at least perhaps point me in the direction of integrating the Reish and the Seif into one whole. What I'd like to do with you now is look at the Gemara. Now, I don't expect that you have a Gemara in front of you. It's a Gemara in Kiddushin on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, in the first parak of Masechta Kiddushin, Ha'isha Niknes, and I'll try to read to you the relevant lines in the Gemara. It's not a very long sugya, but I sense that it's the main sugya. And all this is meant to lead us to the Rambam. The Rambam is in Hilchas Talmud Torah, and we'll open up the Rambam, and after seeing the sugya, we'll try to figure out, the Gemara is going to present a machlokes here between Chachamim, the Tanna Kama, and Rabbi Yossi. We can try to figure out where the Rambam fits in. So on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, if you happen to have a Gemara or access to a Gemara, it's about 2/3 down the page. Tana Rabbana. Mipnei Seva Takum. Now keep in mind, Mipnei Seva Takum seems to indicate that the Machayev here is the age of the person. No word of Zaken, meaning Chachma, as we said before, Zaken is Misha Kana Chachma, is indicated in the Reisha of the Pasuk, and therefore the Brisa raises the following possibility. Yachal, I might think, Afilu Mipnei Zaken Ashmoi, and the word Zaken here, we have to be very careful, means an older person. Now, what's Ashmoi? So Rashi tells us that Ashmoi comes from the word Osham. Oshem, I should read it. And Oshem, says Rashi, means a Rasha who's a total amoritz. He's an ignoramus as far as Torah is concerned. Notice Rashi doesn't say he's a guy, an alta guy, but it could be that one could argue. I wouldn't at this point put it into Rashi's, and feel comfortable about that, but one could argue that the Havamina of the Gemara, and we'll see it's going to be one opinion in the Gemara, would say that you have to stand up for an old guy, an alta guy. But Rashi's talking about a Jew who's old. He's guilty in the sense that he's not, one of these great scholars who observes the letter to the T. And he's called an Ashmoy. So the Brisa continues, and the Brisa says the following. Talmud Lomar Zoken, meaning it can't be that the Torah obligates you to stand up for an Ashmoy because the Pasuk says Zoken. And Rabbosai, this seems to indicate again, as we sensed intuitively, that this Pasuk should be taken as one integral whole. And the Seifa is now Magal on the ratio, that since it says Vadarta Pnei Zoken, Ein Zoken El Chacham, And therefore, it cannot be that B'nai Seva Tokum, the Chiyuv of Kima, is obligatory vis-a-vis an Ashmoy. Because as we said, Rashi points out that Ashmoy is an Amorit, so he's certainly not a Zaken in the sense of a Chacham. Now, how do we know that the word Zaken refers to a Chacham? Maybe a Zaken is an old man, whether he's an Amoritz or a Chacham. So the Brisa continues and says, Shenemar, Osfa li shivim ish, mi Ziknei Yisrael. So Ziknei Yisrael is a use of the word Zaken, and Moshe, through Yisro's recommendation, etc., is going to gather together 70 Ziknei Yisrael. Rashi says, Hasam, there in that context, Zkenim v'chachamim hayu. They weren't a group of old people. They may have been old, but that's not what the word Zaken indicates. They were chachamim, and how do I know that? They were going to make up the great Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin Agdol of 71 elders. Kirich Siv, and Rashi proves it. Asher yadata kihem, we know that they are the scholars. Almas kenim v'yeduim ham. Yeduim, I think in Rashi might mean the men of prestige, because they are the scholars, the leaders, and the Talmidei Chachamim. And it says Osfalis Shivim Miziknei Yisrael. So we see that the word Zaken is a Chacham. Skenim v'Chacham. Now the Brisa quotes Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Now, when we read Rabbi Yossi Haglili in the Sefer of this Brisa, we assume intuitively that he's coming to argue against the Tanna Kama. And it says Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omer, Ein Zaken Ela Misha Kana Chachma. And he quotes a different pasuk, a pasuk in Mishlei to prove this. Hashem Kanani Reishis Darko. So now we're going to have a problem, because Rabbi Yossi Haglili, again, like the Tanna Kama in this Brisa, rejects the interpretation of Seva. If they say V'tokum, there's a Chiv Kima in front of a Zaken Ashmoy, who's a total Amoritz. So he also is operating with the same premise that the word Zaken at the end of the pasuk, V'adarta Pnei Zaken, reveals something about the beginning of the pasuk when it says they say V'tokum. It's not just Seva per se, just because he's an alter mensch, we have to stand up for him, but rather he's got to be a Zaken, as it says in the Sefer of the pasuk. So obviously, when we finish with this Brisa, the Gemara is going to have to analyze this Brisa and ask what's the difference between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Then the Brisa says, Yachol Yamod Bipanav Mimakom Rachok. Is it possible that I'm here and this Zaken Chacham is all the way there, he's very far away? Maybe I have eye contact, because otherwise, what's the havmina that I have to stand up for him? I must be able to see him, but from a distance. Talmud Lomer Tokum Vadarta. Lo amarti kima ela b'makom sheish hidur. Again, once again, we see the overlap that hidur in Vadarta Pnei Zaken is going to reveal something about Tokum, if they say the Tokum. And apparently it's only considered a kima sheish ba hidur if he's close up to me. Nobody knows that I'm standing up because this guy is a chacham, he's a zaken chacham, if I stand up here and he's all the way over there. Maybe I was in the mood to stand up. So that doesn't qualify as a kima sheyesh ba hidur. Yochel yadrenu b'mamon. like we spoke about before, hidur means a hidur mitzvah. How much do you spend on a hidur mitzvah? You have an esrog that sells for 100 shekel, and you have an esrog that sells for 1,000 shekel. How much do I have to spend out of pocket for a hidur mitzvah? So I might think that when it says V'adarta pnei zaken, what it means is that this chacham should be supported, and that's the hidur. The hidur is to spend your money to help him out financially. Talmud lomar takum. Now we go back to the first part of the pasuk. Meaning, if we only had the second part of the pasuk, V'adarta pnei zaken, okay, we've identified the person that's machayev. He's got to be a zaken chacham. But now we have to ask, well, what is the expression of my obligation? How does it express itself? Maybe it expresses itself in my sending him a check from TD Bank on Wilson, if it still exists. I don't know. Anyway, so no, because the beginning of the pasuk says takum. Now, takum doesn't cost me a dime. Just to stand up, that's not digging into my pocket. Ma kima she'ein bo chisaron kis, af hidur she'ein bo chisaron kis. So the word hidur could not refer to spending money because hidur has to be interpreted in the light of kima. And just like kima doesn't require spending a dime, it's no chisaron kis, so too hidur doesn't require spending a dime. Let's take this equation, says the Brisa, between hidur and kima one step further. Yachal, I might think, yama mipadu v'beis hakisei v'beis hamerchatz. So we're in a public outhouse or we're in a public bathhouse and I have to stand up for this zaken chacham. Talmud lomer takum v'adarta. Again, takum v'adarta. Lo amarti kima el b'makom sheyesh hidur. So again, the kima is going to teach me something about the hidur, that the hidur is not a chisaron mamon, because kima doesn't require spending a dime. And now the hidur is going to tell me something about the kima. Not every kima is obligatory or meaningful, because in this case of a beis hakise beis hamerchatz, it's not a kima sheyesh by hidur. So I need a hidur sheyesh shehi ki kima, which means ein bach chisaron kis, and on the other side of the coin, I need a kima sheyesh by hidur. So in this equation between kima and hidur, in both directions, A reflecting on B and B reflecting on A, I derive two halachas, two exclusions. I'm not obligated to stand in, let me say it differently. I'm not obligated to give honor and respect to the chacham by spending money and sending him a check. And I'm not obligated to stand up for a chacham in a beis hakise, in a beis hamerchatz. Yachal yatzim einov kimi shelo ro'ehu. Now this is a very strange havamina in the brisa. I'm going to close my eyes and make believe I don't see him. I guess in truth I did see him. See, very strange. I mean, if I didn't see him, then I'm not chayev. I mean, why would I have an obligation to stand up? I'm not even aware of his presence. Elo, what I saw him. So I would think the moment you saw him, you're obligated to stand and fulfill the mitzvah b'nei seva takum. So what good would it do if you closed your eyes? You know, it's like, let's say, I come into shul on the first day of Sukkot, I have a lulav. So what am I going to do? I'm going to close my eyes? Why is that relevant? It would only seem to be relevant to close your eyes before you see him. But if you didn't see him, you know, what's the havamina that you'd be obligated to stand for him? it seems to me that the only way of understanding this brisa is that we already excluded rachok. We said that if he's far, far away, even though you saw him, you're not obligated, because that doesn't give him any hidur. It just looks like you're standing up. It's good to do stretches. But now he comes closer. So at what point does he come close enough? How do you measure this? I have to ask my wife for a meter, right? At what point do you say, well, he came close enough that I'm obligated? So it could be that, let's say, Dalet Amos is usually a classic shear of Richuk Mokom, right? So let's say he's outside of the radius of Dalet Amos. Maybe I'm not chayav because that's not hidur. I happen to be standing up. Once he enters into the Arba Amos, then I'm obligated in the mitzvah of Kima. But at that point, I close my eyes. It's still very sticky over here, very thorny, because when did I close my eyes? Did I close my eyes after he entered the 4 Amos? Then obviously I'm chayav. Joe?
Could you not say what it's trying to emphasize that with this is that the mitzvah is not necessarily got to do with him. It's got to do with you. In other words, you might think.
Well, wait a second, Joe. I think you're a few steps ahead of me. Just before you say what you say, which may be brilliant, but what's the case? First of all, I have to get the case.
You're saying
what's the mitzias, as we say in
yeshivas? You're saying what is it? What's the issue of closing your eyes?
Yeah,
why is he talking about closing your eyes?
I can't get the scenario down. Can you just give me, before you give me lumdus and tell me, well, it's him, it's me, it's him. But what's the scenario? I need to know.
Scenario is you're in a room, you're close enough to him, and you're you're within a certain distance with him, and that's trying to say, well, maybe I can close my eyes, pretend not to see him, and therefore I don't have to. I don't have to stand up.
I'm asking you a different question. When you say I pretend not to see him,
not me. That's what you were saying. That the Chazal was saying. That
again, when I don't mean you, I'm not. Don't take this personally. When one says that he pretends that he didn't see him.
So you're close enough to him. You're close enough that by standing up, it would be noticeable that you're standing up because of him.
No, but I'm asking Joe. I have a lulav. It's the first day of Sukkot. Is there a Havamini that I could pretend that I don't have a lulav?
No, but I'm just asking. Maybe it's saying this to emphasize the idea that a person, you might be thinking that the kavod to the chacham or to the zaken is because of him, because of his
honor.
It's on the fact that he's within a certain distance, right? You might be
close enough that I could honor him.
That there's an honor that comes to him within a certain distance, and if that honor, right, is if you see him he's seen within that certain distance that you're supposed to stand. But it's so the Gemara.
But I'm asking a different question, Joe. Did I see him within that distance, or did I not?
That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. So let's say I'm looking the other way, so I didn't see him. So I'm putter from it because I'm within that distance, but I'm looking the other way. So is it got to do with the scenario? But it's saying the issue is with my responsibility to stand up. And that's why it's saying don't even if you pretend not to see him, so he doesn't know, everybody around you doesn't know that you actually saw him, so you're not standing up. No, it's saying the issue, the chiyuv is on you. It's not on the scenario of seeing him.
Okay, so let me just try to reformulate. I think I finally figured out what you're saying. Hasimon Yagad, as the Israelis say. I think what you're saying is that the Havamina is that even though I saw him, nevertheless, I'm not obligated. Why? Because he might not know that I saw him because I looked the other way. And
And
Kamash
that's why it's
know that
emphasizing.
I have an obligation to stand for him, irrelevant to whether he knows I looked the other way or he didn't know. I hear. Maybe that's what the brisa means. Let's read it inside. It says here the following: Yochol Yatzim
It's
Eno.
just I'm just saying it's Bobby's fault that he didn't explain it better than me. That's all.
All right, okay, we'll hit the ball into Bobby's court. Tamalomar Tokum Viaresa. The end of the pasuk, which we never quoted in this year, is Viaresim Hashem Elokecha. Why did the Torah have to say Viaresim Hashem Elokecha when we talk about a mitzvah standing in front of a chacham? And the Bryce is telling me that Viaresim Elokecha means you know that you saw him. Okay. Now the Gemara says, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So we're 5 lines before the end of the Amud on Lamed Beis Amud Beis. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Hainu Tanakama. What did Rabbi Yossi Aglili add or subtract from the Tanakama? They both said that Zokin is not an Ashmai, it's not an Alta guy who knows nothing, or an Alta Yid who knows nothing, it's a Zokin Chacham. And that's where Rabbi Yossi reiterates. So what's the difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi? Why do we need Rabbi Yossi to come in here in this price? And the Gemara answers, Ika beinayu yonik v'chacham. Yonik means a youngster, but he happens to be a chacham. I mean, they say that the Vilna Gaon knew Shas at the age of 6. I don't know if it's true or not true, but they don't say that about you and me. I mean, I'm still trying with this Daf Yomi business. I still can't figure out how you make cheese. But anyway, so Rabbi Yossi Aglili is going to be Macharish a Gavaldige Chiddush. Tanakama Sover Yonik v'Chacham Lo. Because we need 2 elements, as we saw before. Rashi said, if you remember, I'm going to just reiterate the Rashi. Rashi says, Hasam, in the case of Osfo Li Shivim Zakenim, Zakenim v'Chacham. Alma Zakenim v'Chacham. Because Rashi saying you need 2 elements. In order to generate the chiyuv, you've got to be not only a chacham. That per se is not enough. You could be a precocious young genius, but you got to also be a zaken. Because those people who were gathered together to make the Sanhedrin were both Zikanim. I don't know exactly how old they were. Maybe they were 60, 70, I don't know. And they were also Chacham. But a Yonik v'Chacham, even though he's way beyond his years and he has Chachma, but no, he's still a Yonik. And he's not a Zaken. And Rabbi Yossi Aglili saw Rafilu Yonik v'Chachim. So age, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, is not a factor. And even if he's a Chacham who's very, very young, it doesn't matter. You have to stand for him. Now, I wonder how young is young. Maybe he has to be bar mitzvah. I don't know. So the Gemara asked my time at Rabbi Yossi Aglili, what was bothering Rabbi Yossi Aglili with the Tanakama? I mean, the Tanakama made a very good, valid point. Asfa li shivim zkenim, and those zkenim were both zkenim and chachamim. Lafuke to exclude yonim. Omelecha. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of why Rabbi Yossi Aglili expands the application of the mitzvah of Hidur and Kima to include even a Yonik v'Chacham. Tanakam is right. Imkain Nichtov Rachmana, the Torah should have said, Mipnei Seva Zoken Takum Vadarta. In other words, the Torah should have combined Seva and Zaken before the mitzvah was formulated as Takum Vehadarta. why did the Torah separate between the two? And the implication is that Seva, says Rabbi Yosef Haglili, is one element, and Zikna is a different element, and each one independently generates the mitzvah of Kima. I mean, Rabbi, are you following this? This is a very profound sugya. I mean, it's just to try to get into this. Maishna, says Rabbi Yosef Haglili, de Palginu Rachmana. Why did the Torah separate it? And it has one mitzvah of Kima with regard to Seva, and then Hidur with regard to Zaken. Apparently, they're two separate Machayvim. No, it's not good. I just realized it's not. What I just said is not good. It's not two separate Machayvim because it's got to be, right? We excluded Ashmai because he's not a Zaken. So even Rabbi Yosef Haglili has to combine the two parts of the pasuk. But maybe let's just think. If it would have said the way Rabbi Yosef Haglili says, one second. I thought I had it, but now no. Let's hold it on for a minute and let's go on. There's more in the Gemara. Maybe we'll get clarity. Maishna de Palginu Rachmana Lememra, it must be telling us the high lav high, the high lav high. Let's see Rashi. Isal kedaita kida omer Tanakama dechadhu. So Tanakama is holding that we integrate the two, and therefore the vadarta pnei zaken in and of itself, zaken meaning kana chachma, is not enough. You need also seva. Chadhu, the Iri Beikra, seva v'hu chacham. So it's got to be both seva, whatever seva means, but certainly it can't be a 30-year-old. Nichtov, if the Tanakam is right, when they seva takum, when they seva zaken takum vadarta, v'nigmar gzeir shava. Oh, Rashi introduces gzeir shava. Ma'ishna de palginu shmamino tarti bili ninu hachi komer. Oh, now Rashi's going to explain Rabbi Yosef. Mipnei seva takum v'adarta. Mipnei seva takum v'adarta takum. V'adarta takum. And then v'adarta pnei zaken shekana chachma. It sounds like, according to Rabbi Yossi, you're reading the word v'adarta in both directions. V'adarta reflects on seva, and it's also the beginning of zaken. Zaken means chacham. So you have a mitzvah of hidur, which means standing up in front of a chacham. And that applies even though he's a yonik, because he's a chacham. So what's mipnei seva takum? Umida karpira chachma amrina nami seva lav zaken ashmoi kama. Whoa, Rashi's learning two things according to Rabbi Yossi from the zaken. Number one, he's got to be a chacham lafuki ashmoi, who doesn't know his beings, and number two, seva reflects on zaken to tell me that he can't be a yon. Okay, so Rashi has a whole shtickle Torah now that Rabbi Yossi never disagreed that we exclude a zoken who's a shammai. Tanakama mishum deboy lemismach zoken v'aresa. The Tanakama, my time, why did the Tanakama reject Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Isal kedaita kidom Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Im kein nichtov rachmana, the Torah should have said, mipnei seva talking about darta, and talking about darta pnei zaken. Beautiful. The Chachamim reject Rabbi Yossi because according to you, Rabbi Yossi, there are two machayim over here. There's one machayev because he's a seva, meaning he's an older person, and then so why did the pasuk separate them? Shma mino chadhu. Oh, this is what Rashi took it from here. So Rabbosai, I tell you what we're left with here. What we're left with is we don't understand Rabbi Yossi Aglili. But the bottom line is that Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that you don't need seva, you need chachma. We're still confused about what Rabbi Yossi Aglili does with the pasuk Mibnei Seva Takum, totally confusing us because Seva is not an element of it, it's just Chacham, and the Chacham might be a 13-year-old. So I just want to read to you the Rambam, because I promised you that we'd come back to the Rambam and add the Kesef Mishnah. So the Rambam is in Perek Vav, Mihilchas Talmud Torah Halacha Aleph, and if possible, next time we get together, if you can possibly bring a Rambam Hilchas Talmud Torah, that's in Sefer Mada, at the very beginning of the 14 books. The Rambam writes, Kol Talmid Chacham Mitzvah Lahadro. So the Rambam adds the word Kol. Every Talmud Chacham, you have to stand for him. Did the Rambam qualify that he has to be a certain age? Again, I'll read it again. Kol Talmid Chacham Mitzvah Lahadro. There's no qualification here. Says the Kesef Mishnah, V'Rabbeinu Posak Rabbi Yossi. Interesting. You and I would have guessed that in a Machlokes Shin Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi Aglili, we might paskin like the Tanakama. Says the Kesef Mishnah, the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, which means there's only one condition that has to be met in order to generate the obligation of standing, and that is Chachma. Mishu Zaken Kana Chachma. There's no additional obligation of Seva. Age does not play a role, and therefore the Rambam says, Kol Talmid Chacham Mitzvah Lahadro.
So what is the seva for then?
I don't know. So that's the one question that still remains outstanding here. According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, why did the Torah confuse us by introducing seva when seva is not an element at all? And I believe
one second, the Rambam is only talking about Talmud Torah. The Rambam only talks about Torah. He's not saying anything about seva. Seva might be its own obligation.
No, again, the question between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Chacham is whether I have to stand for Yonik for Chacham. In other words, a young.
Understood, but the Rambam not
says,
saying.
Kol Talmid Chacham Mitzvah Lahadro.
Right.
And the Rambam goes on to say, Shenemar, Mipnei Seva Takum, V'adarta Pnei Zaken, Zaken Zesha Kana Chachma. So the Rambam is saying I have to stand up for a Zaken, and who is a Zaken? Says the Rambam, it's Misha Kana Chachma. Therefore, the Rambam concludes, Kol Talmid Chacham, with regard vis-a-vis any Talmud Chacham, no age requirement is necessary. Says the Kesef Mishnah, he's reflecting the Shita of Yossi Aglili. Bobby is asking the question that we asked before. So why did the Torah hack me in Chinik, hack me in Kaparayin, with this Seva Taku? And Rashi apparently is trying to answer this question, which I don't understand exactly. We have to end soon, but maybe we'll try it one more shot at Rashi. Rashi says the following. What was Rabbi Yossi Aglili's argument against the Tanakama? Techadhu, meaning that according to the Chachamim, Seva should be integrated into Zikna, and to some extent, whatever that is, there's got to be an age requirement. Maybe you have to be 18. I don't know how old you are. Right? What does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah say? Hareini kiven shivim shana. Maybe you have to be 70 years old. So again, Tanakama says, Chadhu di Iri be kra seva v'hu chacham. So the Chachamim are very interested in emphasizing the word seva. Seva is an element in the equation of precondition. Says Rabbi Yossi, if that be the case, Nichtov, the Torah should have said, Mipnei seva zaken takum v'adarta. Should have said, Mipnei seva zaken. I guess if you were to put the word seva together with the word zaken, it would tell you that it's not enough to be a zaken, you also have to be seva.
Only an old Talmud Chacham.
Right, only an old Talmud Chacham. So again, if you are right, Tanakama, says Rabbi Yossi, then it should have said seva zaken, an old Talmud Chacham, whatever that age is. Okay. Maishna de Palginu. So why did the Torah separate? And with regard to Seva, it says Takum. With regard to Zaken, it says Vadarta. That's separating the two. Shmamina Tarti Mili Ninhu. But again, that still begs the question. If it's Tarti, Mili, Ninu, they're two separate entities, then with regard to Mipnei Seva Takum, we should... maybe Rabbi Yossi holds... No. That's what Rashi points out, that it's got to be a Zaken, even according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Right? Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Ein Zaken El Misha Konachov.
In other words, it's a Dora Pashat that somebody who's an old man, you have to stand up in front of him. You can't take it away from the...
No, Bobby, that's not so. If he's an old man and he's an Amoritz, he's an Ashmoy. And even Rabbi Yossi Aglili excludes him because he's not a Zaken.
But I happen to have here the Mishnah Torah, Hilchos Talmud Torah, Perek Vav, where the Rambam says, "Mishu zaken muflag bezikna afal pisha ein chacham andim lefanav."
Right, but that's a derabanan. That's not included in the pasuk. We'll get to that, Rambam, but that's not part of what we're discussing. That's like a kind of a halacha of respect. We're talking about the technical halacha and doraisa requirement of kima. But again, we're very late, so let me just try to, one more time, if you don't mind, to make an attempt at this Rashi. Hachi ka'amar. Again, Rashi's explaining Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Mipnei seva takum ve'adarta takum ve'adarta pnei zaken shekana chachma Vafilu Yonik Mida Kapit Achachma, I'm reading Ami Sevulav Zokin Ashman. Okay, so let's leave this question for another time. We always have to end the shir with a question to keep our level of excitement up. And our question is, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, why did the Torah say seva? And Bobby quotes this Rambam later on in Perek Vav, Halacha Vav. But again, we're not ready for that Rambam. That Rambam has to do with the Rabbanans. But one thing we do know, that the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that even a Chacham who's a Yannik, you're obligated to stand in front of him. Exactly why and how Rabbi Yossi came to that conclusion, that's a different question. Okay, then Rabbi say this is where we're going to stop, and it's an exciting starting of a new project. Thank you so much.